I'm used to seeing your videos and watching you speak, and I've never actually spoken to you in person before. So it's nice to have you on and we could have this chat.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us. And, I like to connect with people who are very proactive in different areas. Health is one of the biggies, of course.
Yeah.
Without health, you got nothing. So
Yeah,
I'm
so
still recovering my own health too. I had mercury poisoning nearly 5 years ago for the third time. I shouldn't be here. My
wow.
specialist says he's never heard of a person survived 3 doses.
Yeah, mercury is probably one of the worst ones.
Pretty toxic, yeah.
Yeah. How did
I
how did
had
that happen? Did you get exposed to some of that?
Yeah, I had my fillings out in 2008, unprotected, and that nearly killed me that year. But then in 2013, I had 2 root canals done, and I didn't want them done, but they wouldn't put the
Mm.
caps on. And I told them I don't want amalgams or those metal fillings. And they said, sure,
Yeah.
they won't do it, but they did do it and put porcelain over it. And within a year, I was frozen up and I had to recover from that. Took a little while, a couple of months, and I was okay with natural anti-inflammatories. They gave me prescriptions for chemo. You got to be kidding me.
Oh, wow.
The third time was in 19 when I was doing a mucoid plaque cleanse. We all
Yeah.
have plaque that accumulates, which helps to stop nutrients getting into the bloodstream across the villi. So I decided I'd give it a clean, but I didn't realize that all the plaque captures a lot of the heavy metals as it goes out of the body. So it released it and in vapor form, and it went round the body again, and it was good fun.
Oh no. At least you were used to the symptoms previously, so you probably knew it was the same sort of thing.
Few additionals. I was virtually had MS.
Oh,
One
wow.
professional
Yeah.
thought she said she's never seen such a severe case, and the only other one, well, he was gone in 9 months. But I know enough to keep alive, but sometimes I don't know enough until you know what you're dealing with. Fortunately, Gerald had a Metatron, and he was looking after me for a number of years, but they took him out 2 years ago. He's an 80-year-old, and he was found with a pillow full of blood. But they put it down to a heart attack. But it's a funny place to have a lot of blood. He
Not
helped a lot of
suspicious,
people.
eh? No. So he
No,
helped a lot of people.
yeah, he did.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're here because you've educated and you've been part of my journey.
He
You were one
did.
of the first that I came across and learnt from in the very beginning of all the tyrannical things we were experiencing in the last few years. I had never gone down that path, and I came across your work and it was really helpful.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Though you seem far too young to be really interested in that sort of thing.
Well, I didn't have a choice at the time, and I'm someone who's proactive. And when I felt powerless, I went on a journey on trying to find answers to empower myself, and it did really help. But it was still a challenge. It
Oh, yeah.
always is. It's not an easy thing to face. I can see why a lot of people would choose just to give their power away and go along with it. But I'm very stubborn like that. So
That's really what it takes. Some grit, put the head down and tail up and just go for it. Confrontation is never my priority, though. I rather just sidestep and let them charge through. And then as they go over the cliff, give them a good kick in the backside and just help them across. The best way of doing that is when you just simply ask them questions that they refuse to answer. Then they realize they're out of jurisdiction. It's the easiest game in town once you know.
yes, I had to learn that the hard way, but eventually I did. And you just use the momentum against them, I suppose. Get them into a position where lead them to a dead end.
That's the idea. That
Yeah.
you've got to guide them down to a funnel where they realize that they don't actually have the jurisdiction and authority that they always believed they had.
Mm.
They hide behind the corporation, but corporations are dead. And at the end of the day, if they do the wrong thing, the corporation isn't going to protect them. They
And they
just
don't even know that until it happens to them, right?
exactly.
Mm.
And often when you're dealing with these, I shouldn't say crooks, but because there are good people also in the public realm, it's just they seem to draw a lot of narcissistic minded people, especially these days where they want to oppress people with one thing or another.
Mm.
So it's up to us to just hold our position and just ask them the right set up questions. And it doesn't take much before they realize, hang on, they don't have the power. But also, if they're in that public realm, then you can bring up that they have to have indemnity insurance. It's an Achilles heel, and that you'll target their insurer, and they may be out of work if they keep persisting with what they're doing without validating their claims.
Mm.
Could be in serious trouble. And I'd suggest back off a bit.
Mm. Yes. That indemnity insurance one is key, isn't it?
It's one of the biggies.
Yeah.
Same as their internal codes of conduct. Haven't really done any private jobs for a couple of years now. I should say a handful I've done, but very few. I'm doing things on a bigger scale, but also this house has got to be finished. And so I'm juggling things around all the time. But one of the real Achilles heels is that code of conduct. And if I go into battle where I go to a meeting, for instance, roundtable meeting, then I'll make sure that I've already downloaded a copy and can throw it on the table and say, are you aware of this?
Mm.
Do you know what the contents are? And do you know what you're obligated and accountable for and liable for? Well, you better read that first if you're not, because I can take you to page this and that and the other, or whatever it is. And quite a lot of them have very large amounts of common denominators. So all of them say that they must be transparent, honest, open, fair, just, and accountable. So if you just know those few things, then you can set them up right from the beginning already. They soon know that they're going to fail.
That's very handy to know to be prepared like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been around for a while, Mark. Like, even though I discovered you during the scamdemic, you've been doing this stuff even before then, right?
Yeah, I started in 99, but I've always kept a low profile. I've had many people ask me to set up websites and maybe do meetings and to do interviews, but I've always avoided it, even from the beginning. It's only that one guy went to two of my workshops and he sort of insisted that he do an interview, and dragging my feet reluctantly, I did that. And he had 100,000 hits, and his name is Tom Barnett. And because of that particular webinar, it went viral, and I had about a dozen interviews that year with people from the UK and some big groups in America and a couple more in Australia. I was trying to avoid all that, but that was, golly, I think that was about 2020. So for 21 years, I avoided it. And I still have my neck, you know. A lot of people go online, YouTube and BitChute and that, and they blah, 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 and expose this and that. And then they get taken out. Especially
Mm.
in America, they get taken out, or they get roped into legal proceedings and they end up in jail. And quite a number of big names have ended up in Canada and America in jail. But I just
Mm.
keep going on my merry way because I try to avoid being in public areas and public
Yeah.
realms and just do business privately.
Yeah,
And
well, people like you are a major threat, and they will target you and make an example out of you. So you've been very smart with that.
that's happened in the past.
Mm.
I had one family member that was actually institutionalized quite illegally. And when I found out, I went to bat. Unfortunately, I probably would do it a little bit differently now and use different names, but they were very close family. And so I went to the health minister of state and federal level, and they wouldn't help. But I was exposing a racket where they're kidnapping elderly into institutions, doctors signing off of incompetency. Two particular doctors, and of course, thousands of people had been institutionalized, and where the partner that's still outside takes care of all the accounts, and when there's nothing left, they take the house off. That's the whole purpose, is to transfer people's estates to these thugs. And I was exposing it, and that got me into big trouble in 2011. I had to
I
fight
bet.
out of jail, to be honest.
Wow. So you were in jail for a little bit?
Yeah, That's a story in itself too. I've got
Yeah.
many stories, but I spent 2 months there, and I did a writ of habeas corpus from posters that I could find in the yard when they let me out, because I was a political prisoner and they wouldn't let me have paper and pen. So I went and scavenged what I could and drew up a writ of habeas corpus and then an affidavit to support it. And the don of the institution, or the superintendent, realised that I was there and was not yet charged. Well, that can't happen. So he actually brought in a JP to seal my affidavit, which was very nice of him. That got me thrown before the Supreme Court and then very quickly out again. So I got out. But that was a worry, when I don't have an army. And sometimes I think that we really have to run a parallel system. I'm beginning to start now setting it up. Should have been set up already 4 years ago. I started, and about 3 weeks into it, every week I had a webinar, and the third one we had over 200 people on it, and starting to appoint people for this role and that role and get infrastructure in. And then somebody else took it over, and within a few weeks he abandoned it because his mother got sick. So I didn't resurrect it because I had egg on my face. And if I do that again, I won't relinquish control, because just from experience, people aren't prepared to go the whole way like I do. If I start something, I finish it. But unfortunately, there's not many people with that sort of mindset or grit. The littlest thing can derail and take one off another tangent. You can't afford to do that. If you're in a war, you don't go to lose. You go in there to win, and win as quickly as possible with the least casualties. I can tell you those sort of tactics because I learned from some very interesting people. I don't know how much I can say, but I was asked to join some political parties, several, over the last few years, and I avoid politics because often the worst of the worst get called in there. But independents, to be fair, they have integrity mostly, most of them, and they have also a mission and a dream to make a difference, but they don't have the resources or the knowledge. And I met someone back in 2004. He came from Melbourne, spent 3 days with me, and I learnt what they did in another country where a nobody took control of the government, restored the country to its former glory within 4 years, and kicked out the fractional reserve banking system. They took over the Reserve Bank. It took about 4 or 5 years. They had to pay the gangsters out again. And the government then had control over their own money-making machinery. And that country became the richest country on earth in 4 years. It took the entire rest of the world to crush it because others were waking up that thugs are controlling the world. Many people, they find it hard to believe certain facts. Like, for instance, you might say, well, it's interesting, but could the earth really be round? And then, not one of those flat earthers again. You can see it in people's faces. So sometimes when you bring up some new things that they haven't heard, it's like, can't be true. But I think all of us have had some of those experiences. In my time, people made claims, and I thought, that can't be true. But when they provided the evidence, I had to change my thinking. So when the evidence is there, you don't learn unless you grow. And to grow, you've got to keep an open mind. There's a fellow called Jim Rohn. I met him many times when I was young, and he made more billionaires apparently than any other man. But he did say that your biggest enemy is your own closed mind. I was only a young fellow then. I thought, Mark, keep your mind open. And boy, does it make a difference. You don't have to actually make a decision necessarily on a subject matter that's true or not true, but to keep the mind open until there's enough information to disregard it or affirm it. But just to throw something out without testing, and that applies even with the industries we're in. When I hear things from America or Canada or the UK, and we've been very much ahead of a lot of the world, but not everything. But I'm the one that tests things that come into the country, and I find 90% of it doesn't work, and I've got scars to prove it. I'm the one that finds out what does work and what doesn't work, and I can tell you the 10% that does. But I learned that philosophy also from a networking company that did very thorough training. They said, Mark, 90% of everything out there is opinion and 10% is fact. Stick to the facts. It's the same in the legal or lawful arena. So really everything in life is about sticking to the facts. So unless you've got the evidence, just shelve it, but don't necessarily throw it out, because most things you can throw out, but you don't know what.
Thank you for sharing that, Mark. I think it's really important to acknowledge that when you are on this path and this journey, there are going to be times where things are going to happen out of your control that will be illegal and that will go wrong. But as you said, you can't give up, you can't stop, you have to keep going. And I think that the problem is, and with people like us who talk about and advocate for this sort of stuff, we get attacked because there are people who go in, things go wrong, they pull out, they can't handle it, and then sort of give this work a bad reputation, a bad name, and then that skepticism rises up, you know?
Very
And
much
it's
so.
like, yeah, well, what did you do? Did you follow up with that? Did you try every avenue? So
Mhm.
it's so important that you shared that. I think it's really crucial that people are aware of that. It's not an easy path. No, we're not saying it's easy, but there's always a remedy if you do what's right.
It gets easier though,
Hmm.
just like riding a bike. Once you start putting the key pieces together and practice it, you'll find that it all gets easier and easier. It's not hard. It's just that we're not taught and we've never been exposed to it before.
Hmm.
But I'm fortunate because I made a career of it pretty early. My career is virtually extinct. I did agricultural science and I got out of uni, and the war between America and the UK and Europe had already come and gone, and Australia's agricultural sector suffered and was disappearing. We used to send all our stuff to the UK and to America to a point, and it was a growth industry. Agriculture fed Australia
Hmm.
100% and exports. But today we produce only about 20% of what we consume. The rest comes from overseas, and a lot of it from China. It's toxic.
Hmm.
Anyway, the whole
Very
point
true.
was that my industry was wiped out. So I had to re-educate. So there are a lot of things I've done in my time, which is to my credit because it gave me exposure to a lot of different things. I mean, I've seen things that most people would never seen. I had other family that were the real Bonnie and Clyde, for instance. So I walked from an early age with my eyes behind my head. I've seen some things, but I don't say anything because family and family often there's more integrity than when you're not part of that kind of world or culture, because people are out there raping one another. I don't understand that. To an extent, I know that the economic model that we're under puts a lot of pressure on families. When we were young, one person could work just a normal working week and have plenty left over to get luxuries and other things, have a good standard of living. But as I got older and older and older, these days, most couples need to work two jobs just to make ends meet. And a lot of that is because of the burdens that are imposed upon us, like taxes takes between 60 and 90% of what we actually produce, our productivity, directly and indirectly. A lot of it you don't see because it's indirect.
Hmm.
But indirect, a lot of people lose 20, 30, 40,000 a year, and even some a lot more, depending on what their income is. But when you're losing 60 to 90%, well, that just is a burden that is put on prices. So cost of living goes up through the roof. But if we weren't paying that and we put that into avenues where we're supposed to create wealth with, it can make an awful lot of difference. So although I do focus a lot on the legal aspects or lawful aspects with our website and the work that I do, it's only a part of what I do, because I like to give people tracks to run on and knowledge where they can firstly discharge their debts, because the second biggest factor to prevent the creation of wealth after tax is the mortgage. Mortgage meaning death pledge. And I was fortunate that my ex-in-laws, they were self-made multi-millionaires and their business partner was a billionaire. So I learned some strategy about leveraging and creating wealth, and can do it in record time. Really quickly if people focus on it. I haven't. I had a partner for 18 years that I wasn't allowed to do anything. It's my own fault. I let her run over me. I shouldn't have done that. I should have taken the reins. But anyway, I learned as I got older. But anyone who knows the strategies, and we do have a webinar and a module on the website about leveraging the things that I've done, and I haven't done lots, but I know the concepts. And without knowing the concepts and the mindset, people who create wealth lose it again, and usually pretty quickly. But once you've got the mindset, it's very easy to create wealth, but you also need to learn how to protect it, because we've got a system worldwide that is designed to take everything off you as soon as you make it. So it needs to be protected from day one. I didn't know all this when I was a youngster. But when I realized how to do trusts back in 2005, trusts are a key platform to the protection, but also to the launching pad for wealth creation. When I set up my first one, it was a registered one with a look from a barrister. That's the only way you can get them, through lawyers or accountants, and they're all registered before you get them. But when he wouldn't answer a question one day, he told me, get a good book on trust. So I did, and that was in 2005. And from there, I created my own, but they're non-registered ones. So they don't have the language of the registered ones. They don't have the copyright words, and they don't have the legislation. So that you can do business with them. They can interact with the public realm, but they can't control them. That's the beauty of it. They're not regulated. Commonwealth Bank has on their website even non-regulated trusts. In other words, our product. But it can interact with the public realm. But the point being that when you have assets, they're held in trust, and you're the trustee, and you control the estate, much like a director for a company. You make all the decisions. But because it's not yours, if you've got a liability, they can't come for the assets held in trust. It's not taught anywhere.
No.
So we teach that big time, because that's the platform to wealth creation. My property, the first one I bought, was attacked twice, one by a bank and one by a fuel company. Now, if I had have held that in my name or my legal entity name, I would have lost the property twice over. Well, how many lifetimes have we got to save money to buy a property? Trust did its job. Still there today. I haven't built on it. It's another property, but it's there. It's protected. They can't touch it. At the end of your life, or one's life, is where you see families often fracture. The siblings say, oh, I want my 90% of the estate. No, my fair share, 90%, and there's four of you. Well, they all get lawyers and they all go to court, and the judicial and legal system takes 90% of the value of the assets, and the crumbs are spread between the four. And they spend their time on a treadmill all their lives accumulating their asset. And then they die, and same, whereas the wealthy, they have trusts. So the trusts don't die, they die, but someone's already appointed to take over as trustee, and the estate stays together. And I've seen in one generation, because when I was young in the UK, I was supposed to work with one of the top 10 wealthiest people in the UK. They liked my mindset. Anyway, it didn't happen. I split up with my ex, and I was on the outer then. But the youngster, he started with, I think, £2 million, and he became a billionaire. So once you have a threshold to start with, it takes you a lifetime to get your first 20 cents together. House, house isn't much, but it's something. But you don't have another lifetime to actually create wealth. If you start at a young age and a house or a couple of houses are paid for, you can spend your time leveraging and accelerate the whole program and create wealth very quickly. Or you learn, like through the website, how to not pay tax, bypass the tax system, discharge all your liabilities, which we teach. And then when you're unencumbered, whatever you earn can be used to leverage. And there are many ways of doing that. I like real estate, that's one of them. I like turning a dollar into 4 or 5 with real estate. You can do that, but you have to do a little bit of research to find the properties. Or there are programs that can leverage as well. Turn $1 into 4, maybe in 12 months. Thereabout, not many good ones. Most of them are not legitimate, but once you know where to look, there are programs all over the world. There's some very good ones, even in Germany. A friend of mine was telling me they're part of.
Nice.
So every country has something. Well, the
Yeah.
bigger countries, I should say. Australia's probably not got much. There was one some years ago, but he stopped trading. But he was getting an average of 50% return a year on people's capital.
Mm.
Australia is much harder because we literally have a mafia that control this country. It's the most rigid country on earth. It doesn't appear that way, but it
No.
is. You step
Yeah.
out of line and you have your feet chopped off. I've seen some things in my time. I've seen people even in courts. They start the process and they get cold feet because the judge gets a bit angry. So they backpedal and become the legal name again. And then they get the book thrown at them. They get 10 times or twice the penalty they should have got because they dared to pretend that they are a man or a woman.
Mm.
You can't do things half-heartedly with anything in life. I'm not a builder, but because there's hardly any contractors around since the scamdemic started, I've done all the tiling, the painting, built walls, done everything to get this place finished. And the thing is, I like to do things thoroughly. And that's very typical of European, mainland Europe. That's a mindset. The mindset is if you're going to do something, do it properly or don't start.
Mm.
Whereas quite a few countries have this attitude, oh, she'll be right. And really, that doesn't cut it. If you go into court or you go into bat with trying to discharge a debt somewhere with she'll be right, you'll get cleaned up. You
Yes.
know, it's got to be, I'm in it to win and I'm going to clean these people up. And that rubs off on the whole job. It's
Mm.
like a dog. A dog can sense terror or people who are afraid. The system does the same. There's a record on all of us. And if you're fierce, they'll say, hey, leave that one alone. They're too expensive to chase. Go after someone else. So it's up to us to create a record. And unfortunately, not everyone wants to step up. It's hard work learning some of this stuff. Even in school, a lot of people didn't want to learn stuff in school because it's hard work.
Mm.
But at least there it doesn't matter so much because 90% of school stuff is garbage anyway and you never use it again. But here in the real world, to learn some of these principles will totally change your life.
Yeah.
So it might be important to really pick up on, like you have, you've picked
Mm.
up on a lot of things and can make such a huge difference.
Yeah. And I think the important part of it is knowing who you are, because if there's any doubt in that, they'll feed that seed of self-doubt that you may have inside you. And the minute because I've been involved in courts and stuff like that, I see what they do, and they're really good at pretending like you're this crazy person and making you feel like a nut job. And if any part of you's got, even a little part of you that's got a bit of doubt or self-doubt, or you forget who you are in that moment and your power, they're going to sniff that out. And that's where you kind of go downhill. So you really have to be very sure of yourself. You know who you are, you know your standing, you know your power. because they'll sniff that out right away.
I'll look for the weak links. They'll throw, we call them fish hooks, they'll throw fish hooks at you all the time, testing you
Yes.
to see if you're the real McCoy or if you know your stuff or if you'll capitulate. So
Mm.
mentally, in the early days especially, but these days you can run rings around. Once you know, it takes
Mm.
experience, admittedly, but once you know, you don't unlearn it. But a couple of times in courts, when they threw garbage at you, like, you can't do that, and you blah, 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 or, yeah, you know, you can do that, you're human. Mentally, you just duck. But
Mm.
physically, too, sometimes I go, you know, and they'll look at you wondering, what was that? And I just raise my shoulders, you know, you threw something at me and I ducked, you missed, you know.
Yeah.
But it's a bit of entertainment and it takes away your fear, but also makes them relax. And I've had quite a few magistrates say, "Oh, we haven't seen you for a while. What are you up to these days?" And I say, "Oh, I'm just helping a friend here." And you know, is a man the same thing as a person? And they just have a chuckle.
What do you do with yourself now, Mark? Do you fully operate in the private? You don't need to go down those paths anymore. What's your life like at the moment with all of this? Where are you at?
Well, I am in the private realm
Mm.
most of the time. I don't know if we're always, anyone can be entirely in the private realm. I still use a license, for example, car license. I've had more important things to deal with than at the moment a license. But my license is all rights reserved. My passport's all rights reserved. When you reserve your rights, then you don't accept the benefits and privileges with the public ID that you applied for. Your rights are intact. So the legislation that regulates the particular ID doesn't apply to you any longer because your rights are reserved.
Mm.
That's important to know. But here in New South Wales, for instance, titles are held about 99.9% in Torrens title, which you have no rights whatsoever. Queensland still has the majority as fee simple, which all the states used to have, but South Australia started with Torrens title and it went all over Australia. And Queensland, as properties come for sale, they change the status. Fee simple means the owner has exclusive rights to use and possession of the property. But Torrens title is when you get a contract on property, it's a huge contract, and they list about 24 different acts of the state that you're subject to, the purchaser is subject to. Well, I annulled all that by virtue of signing the contract, all rights reserved.
Mm.
Now, by BY meaning by accommodation, that means that the one signing is a different party to the name, two different parties. So I'm acting for the legal name because it can't sign, it's dead. So buy and then sign it, put your name there, and then all rights reserved. So I entered the contract reserving my rights. So all the legislation cited in the contract was just annulled.
Mm.
I don't know if it's done before, but the lawyers will try to prevent that. They did that in Queensland. I wasn't properly prepared when I was living up there. But in New South Wales, I had all my ducks lined up. I had credit, debit cards, passport, license, so forth. So when the
Mm.
lawyer said, "Oh, is that your normal signature?" I said, "Yes." "Do you have evidence?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I put it all on the table. She said, "Well, I can't refuse your signature on the contract." Because if I hadn't have shown that they were all rights reserved, then doing it once off is not my signature. That's a fraud. That could be
Gotcha.
a jailable offence.
Mm.
I'm just letting you people know that if you wanting to protect everything you've got, particularly when it comes to the public realm, because it's a parasitic realm, you want to protect everything you've got. So in the public realm, you should have a signature on everything with all rights reserved.
That's a really good tip. I actually learnt that from you. I have my license had all rights reserved on it, and I haven't done it for my passport because it was still not expired, but I'm gonna do it. We will have to renew my passport. I'll do that. So you've got those two as like your base evidence, like you were saying. So then I can use it for other things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can. And once you've got some, then it's much easier others across the line because,
Yeah.
the public realm will say, oh, you can't sign like that. Well, why not? I just did. Look, no, 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 we won't accept it. So you've got authority to tell me how I sign my signature. That's what I did with the passport office because they don't have authority.
Mm.
I said, well, have you got evidence? Aha, there's the magic words. So if you've got other things with the signature that way expressed on the documents, then they'll have to say, let it go through. So it's very important. But yeah, because I work for myself, I should say, then
Hmm.
I'm already in the private realm. Do I do a tax return? Maybe once every 10 years. And I might do 10 years at once. I haven't done any for a long time because I haven't been approached to. The last time was, I think, 2015, and I hadn't done one for a long time. So I did it all in one go. And my assessments were no tax to pay. I don't have an income. So unless I've got an income, then there's no tax to pay. Sure, a lot goes through our bank accounts, but that's all productivity of my labor, including trading. I set up the bank accounts, the trust accounts. I don't have a personal account, too dangerous in this pirate infested world. So it's either a foundation or a trust account. And that way they can't touch the funds that are in the accounts. From there, if I do trading with cryptos, or if somebody else does the trading, we have funds in different programs. Well, I set the accounts up, I set the wallets up, I connect with the traders. It's all the productivity of my labor.
Mm.
So they don't ask you to complete a tax return and put in your productivity of labor. They say to put in your income. Now, when you know what the definition of income is, then because income is one of those fatal words, I wrote to the tax office again in 2000 and asked them for their definition of the word income. And their barrister wrote back to me with 12 pages of definition, and productivity of labor and sustenance weren't in it. So that's all I have. I don't have income. What's income? So it's a bit different if you're employed,
Mm.
PAYG, because you'll get group certificates. So when you fill out a return, they've got to marry up with your group certificate. There are ways of getting your withheld tax back as well. We've had lots of successes over 20 odd years, 25 years now. So,
Wow.
you know,
That's good to know because I didn't think it was possible if you were an
yeah.
employee. I didn't think there was a loophole for that.
Oh, there are.
Oh,
There are.
I'm sure there are many that want to learn that through you.
Well, there are. There's a webinar and a module on just that subject matter. There's about 80 or 85 modules and webinars now on the website.
Wow.
So each on its own subject matter. Tax is one of them
Mm.
because, it's a hurtful area. People suicide over tax. People starve over tax because they can't afford to, there's no money left over when you pay mortgages, taxes, loans. We've got to get people to a point where they have a very low cost of living. If you've
Mm.
got no debts, if you don't have to pay tax, even utilities you can discharge using one of several ways.
Mm.
Suddenly you've got a very low cost of living, and whatever you earn can be used into skyrocketing your wealth
Yeah.
to
And
make
that's
it.
the thing, isn't it? They want to keep us so small, and they do that with tax, with utilities, with rates and this and that. And that's how they control us. And we're constantly in this vicious cycle of working exhausted just to make it each week. And we don't have energy or the productivity to do other things and to learn what this world really is and be more powerful than them. So I wanted to ask you, when it comes to maximizing tax liabilities, is the best way to do that through a private trust or there are other ways?
There are different methods for different parties as such. For the PAYG, it's a matter of knowing how to complete your tax returns. No
Mhm.
accountant will tell you how to correctly fill them because they're actually tax office agents. They're registered. Lawyers are agents of the Crown. They're not there to help you. They're there to rob you.
Mm.
to redistribute from you to them. Oh, they don't mind you engaging them and paying them, but they're not there to help. I'm not talking necessarily to you.
Mm.
Anyone in the public realm, there are good people in the public realm, but they don't realize that when you register, you're controlled. And you're controlled to help the system rob those who are in the private realm or
That's
who
right.
are not awake.
Mm.
But when you learn what we teach, you can protect yourself, but totally out of their clutches. All your assets can be out of their clutches. And
Mm.
you can leapfrog any claimed interests that may be on your titles, for example, because it's claimed the banks have first lien position on your mortgage. If you've got a property with a mortgage, well, you can gazump that even with just doing a uniform commercial code financing statement. It's a process, but there's remedies for everything.
Mm.
You know, trusts are a big one. Foundations are good too because you can trade through them, a bit like companies, but they're useful in the private realm. Some public realm corporations accept them; they will trade with them, but many won't, and
Mm.
governments won't.
Yeah, I'm finding that with foundations, they're making it really hard now to accept those.
A lot of banks are closing foundation accounts
Yeah.
for the reason that, well, they may be being leaned on. That's one thing. But I know the Westpac was the first one. They closed the foundation accounts because somebody laundered a huge chunk of money through a foundation, and Westpac got hit with a $1.1 billion fine from ASIC. So
Mm.
they thought, well, we'll fix this, and they just closed them all down. And now the other banks are following suit. But no one's closing our trust down. And
Mm.
I think the reason being is because there are two parties that are registered that are connected to the trust. That's the trustee and the settler, which is me, or my legal name.
Mm.
So they can see it. I don't think that they feel that it's a threat.
Yeah. What do you think of PMAs? Do you use those?
Much like a foundation, I don't know that much about it because I haven't really looked into it, but I know a couple of people that do set them up. And they can be useful, particularly in the private realm. They're a bit like the foundation, but in the public realm, there are not many public organizations yet that really accept them or acknowledge them. I think foundations have a bit wider recognition, but maybe one day they'll be more widespread and maybe not. I don't know, because it seems like, the public terrorism is escalating.
Yeah.
So maybe not.
Yeah.
But these days, I make it a priority to make sure everything I do and have is protected
Mm.
so that it's just too expensive for them to come after anything because there are tiers of defense. You just make it so unproductive for them to bother. Much
Yeah.
easier to go for the asleep, those on an
True.
oil beacon.
And that's fair enough. I mean, you did the hard work to get yourself in that position, and so you're getting the benefits of that. And
Well, others, they can benefit too without having to spend 90% of their life on the wrong things. I've spent a lot of years on things that didn't work and trialing out things. I had to find out.
yeah.
For me, not really for anybody else, but for me, because I made a career of this after agriculture was finished and I went into sales a bit, but twice, two companies that I'd set up to have a huge cash flow. This is back 2001. They got cleaned up then, but I was gearing up for several 100,000 a year. Well, back in those days, a house was 100,000, so we're getting two, three, four houses a year. That's not a bad cash flow. But the next one was a card system in 2008. They got cleaned up, and I was just setting up to make about 10 to 20 million a month. I'm serious. I got the contacts and I know how to speak to the corporate heads. I even went into corporate head boardroom tables in my jeans. I was unprepared because I was helping my team. I can sell. Well, it's not sell. I demonstrate and people seem to want to buy. I don't know what it is. But others were finding it difficult, but they had some connections into corporate. So I'd go along and find out I was meeting in a boardroom with everyone dressed up and I'm in jeans. But after the initial shock, this happened twice, but after the initial shock, I don't care anymore because as soon as I open my mouth, I've got them. So we were lining up big sales worldwide. We would have cleaned up the banks. But anyway, they got destroyed. So the point was that I had to re-educate again. And that's when I went heavily into helping people resolve debts or issues or courts or whatever the issue was, whether it's financial or legal or commercial. I've helped a number of companies survive the tax office onslaughts and set them up that they never had the problem again. And I find it fun. I love it when the public realm threaten. Like we've had administrators say, well, we're shutting that company down tomorrow. And the owners, one of them, he was suicidal, he was in hospital. But I look him in the eye and I said, well, that's not going to happen. And I think, who the hell are you? But if you affirm, not nasty, just matter of factly, I said, that just isn't going to happen. So the next day we appointed another administrator. It was so good. I said, you're alleging that these people are incompetent, aren't you? Yeah, that's right. And I said, really? Well, my friend, you know, that $1.1 million debt to Coates Hire, how long did it take you to pay that off? He said, 3 months. I said, how'd you do that? Oh, because you helped us to discharge the other $2.4 million tax debt, we released our cash flow to pay them off real quick. I said, and what about the GST? Oh, yeah, that's paid for. And so you're alleging he's incompetent, but there are no more debts. I said, company's solvent. You're out of here. And he came from Sydney, but he must have thought, who the hell's this guy? So he tried, but he was out of the picture the next day. So we have a lot of power. It's
Yeah.
just that we're not taught how to use it. I
Mm.
tell you, if people could learn a fraction of what I've done, just a fraction, and you got more time. Well, I was full time at it, more than full time. My waking hours, and most of my adult life, I've been single. It doesn't do wonders for a partner. They run. They think I'm going to get taken out or end up locked up. But chung. But you know, when I hit the desk at 8:30, often I well just go to bed at 2 or 3.
Mm.
Sometimes I don't go to bed. I go all night if there's an urgent case.
Wow.
So I was used to doing 80, 100 hours plus a week, every
Mm.
week. You condense that in one lifetime, I've probably done a couple 100 years worth of work. And that's why the website's taken off because that's not been done before.
Yeah, you've established a blueprint for
Yeah.
everyone, which you've yourself have learnt through trial and error. And that's so helpful because that saves us time from having to try all the different avenues. And there's a lot out there.
There's other websites that are coming in now that are using some of the techniques, but they don't have the experience. But that doesn't matter. It's
Mm.
still getting information out, and
Yeah.
I think there's room for everybody.
Yeah, I
The
agree.
good thing with ours is we've had some high net worth Americans, and they're very wealthy, and they've told me they've never seen anything like this website, and I'm insane. We should charge 10,000 US entry because the technology on there is worth millions to them.
Wow.
Even high net worth people don't know all of how to handle tax or how to handle
Mm.
banks and mortgages and so forth, or courts. They have
Mm.
to hire upmarket barristers or silks, as they call them. Once you know, you don't have to.
Mm.
So we can really make a difference to cost of living and people parting with money just to get professional help. They don't need to once you know enough. Like you don't have to learn legislation. You can spend a lifetime in legislation. I don't do that. There are 3 areas of what they call jurisprudence law. Legislation's one of them, but it's appropriate only to one country. Like Australian legislation is only relevant to Australia,
Yes.
not to the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Common law has more applicability to more countries, but not all countries have common law. The
Mm.
highest jurisdiction, and it prevails over all else, is, as you know, the rules of equity, which is part of contract.
Yes.
And that is universal. It's in
Mm.
every country. So when we teach principles of the rules of equity, we get people ringing from all different European countries. It works over here. We just got rid of this debt or that debt, or we beat them in court, or the mortgage is gone, or the credit card debt got taken care of, or whatever it is. And people get excited all over the earth because we stand in the highest jurisdiction. And it's so simple. Business people, they absorb it straight away because they deal in contract or
Yeah.
agreements on a daily basis.
Mm.
Equity, if you have a legal dictionary, I tell everyone they should have a legal dictionary like Black's or Butterworth's, which is an Australian one. If you look up equity, it's what's fair, just, and what is equitable, which is all what we wanted.
Mm.
So rules of equity is actually in the script, the examples of how to use it's actually in the Old and New Testaments. So when you know where to look, and your churches won't be teaching this because they don't know. They're controlled too, by the way. All churches are registered. They're only allowed to teach you what's in that sandbox. They teach out here. There's a jet that will fly anywhere in Australia and close down a church if they teach something out of the curriculum. I
Oh,
learned that many years ago from the highest Mason in Australia.
wow. I knew that churches were controlled, but when you put it that way, that's very interesting.
That doesn't mean that they're not doing good work. If they are teaching morality, morals, and ethics, that's a big plus.
Yes.
Even the most crook churches, and I'm not pointing fingers, but even they at least teach morality.
Mm.
That's a lot better than no morality or no ethics. So it has its place. I can give examples. I don't think cultures were ever designed to mix. This multicultural crap is really a plan by the controllers. I don't want to point fingers, but so that we are a splintered society. There's no homogeneity. We don't communicate across the society because there are too many different cultures and religions. But there are European countries that have banned groups of people coming into their country because they are very, very strongly Roman Catholic. And I'm not saying that's a great church. It's actually in the book of Revelation called the harlot, but they still teach morality.
Mm.
For that reason, those countries are intact today because if you're Muslim or other nationalities, you can't come in there. Whereas you look at Australia, we have everything in this country, and the country is splintering. Society is splintering. We get groups of people that rampage through certain cities at night and actually harm people. Sydney and Melbourne in particular, but Brisbane too. It's not a model that works. It was never meant to work. As much as I like people from other countries, we can visit them. Or if they come from a country where they blend in here, like for instance, the European countries came to Australia, they've all blended in. But there are cultures that don't blend in.
Mm.
There are even enclaves now in Melbourne and Sydney, where if you're a Christian, you cannot enter those enclaves.
Mm.
That's wrong. And there will be civil war in the future as a result. It
Mm.
has to happen, but it was designed to happen that way. Nothing ever happens by accident. I can
Mm.
promise you, Dee, nothing happens by accident. Everything is planned.
Yeah, I do feel like countries where there is just a one language, one religion, they seem to be more passionate, more patriotic, and stick together. So when something does go wrong, everyone's kind of in it together and they can make a change very quickly.
And they can hold their leaders accountable much
Yes.
easier.
Yeah.
when you've got a splintered society, no one goes after, or the small few people that try to go after the hierarchy and hold them to account, it's almost impossible because they don't have the numbers to support them.
Mm,
It really doesn't, it's not a model that's workable for
mm,
us. It's a model that's workable for the elite because they'll control everything. That's why
mm.
they do. That's why they allow immigration.
And I think that's really important because what I found in the tyrannical few years we went through, a lot of immigrants, whether they were afraid because they were worried that they could be kicked out of the country, or they feel that they're lucky and they're in the lucky country, they didn't push back, they didn't fight back. And that's like a large majority here. So
Mm,
those who were fighting back and pushing back for their rights were we were outnumbered because
very.
there's like a large majority who don't want to do anything wrong or feel that they're lucky to be here or have that mentality. So I totally get what you mean by that.
I have to say, I have friends that are from every country on earth. I like people. So I have nothing against people, but I think it's sad that a country's fabric can be destroyed simply because of massive immigration. And it's not appropriate.
Mm,
There are those that come here trying to impose their former laws from the countries they've escaped onto us. My fiance and I were down in Melbourne earlier this year, and I'm down there a lot, but usually during the day. I don't go into Melbourne Central very much. I don't like the big smokes, but we stayed in a hotel there for 2 nights earlier this year, and we went out till 10 o'clock at night both times, and we were shocked. The waves of people both nights were shoulder to shoulder for hours. And she and I were the only white people in the crowd. It seems to me Melbourne is just little Peking now. I don't know what's happened there just in a few years. It's like half of China's come to Australia now. And I've got nothing against Chinese people. I like all peoples. But I thought this was Australia. But it looks like it's going to be China very shortly.
I'm pretty sure people from China own a lot of land and property in Australia and they don't even live here.
And of Australia now.
40%, did you say?
They have the biggest ownership of any country of Australia. They've overtaken America.
And that's concerning because then where does that leave people like us who actually live here?
We will become future slaves.
It's concerning, isn't it?
Unbelievable. How Dirty Dan can get away with that. They
Mm.
are all bribed and they all get big chunks of dough in a Swiss account. The minute they're in power, they're told what to do and how to think. And that happened already from Holt. Holt was the last one that said no. And you know what happened to him? You probably don't. That was in 68. I met one of the 7 Australian Navy divers who were engaged by the CIA. He was only 20 at the time, but Holt had been beaten up on the beach. He was a good swimmer. But anyway, they were told to put him in a boat and put an anchor on him, but make sure he comes up. That looks like it was maybe a shark attack. But they put it on too tight, he never came up. So that's hence the stories in Port Phillip Bay. That's the stories about the Chinese picking him up. It was all crap. He was taken out because he said no to Pine Gap. Now, how I know is I got floppy disks from this guy in 2004 when I met him. He said uh, in 68 they were directed to, geez, I don't even know where this is going, but it doesn't matter. It's old now. They won't do anything about it. He was directed, all of them, all 7 went to Frankston Hospital, and that's the last he remembers. He had a plate put in his head there and a plate over his box, and he woke up in 2004. 4 of them were already dead and 2 were still in the coma. But he woke up for some reason. He now lives in northern Queensland. He's still alive. I get his emails. But he gave me floppy disks and I looked on them and they had the metal there. They had that technology in 68 already. So when Holt was gone, Gordon came in and he was a yes man after that. So were all the ministers after then. So Australia fell in 68.
Wow, that's very interesting. I didn't know any of that.
Oh, I can tell you a few other things, but it's probably not the right forum.
It makes sense because as much as I know since I've been around, they've all been sellouts, and it's good to know when that actually switched. I
Yeah.
knew Howard was a big sellout. I knew Goth was a big sellout, so it goes way beyond them as well, I suppose.
Yeah, I sent years ago a long, long letter to Pauline Hanson, and I also
Mm,
had a long conversation with Rod Calderton because I think they all really mean well. I tried in 2017, 18 to get the biggest independents to unite, because if they could unite and then field a candidate at every electorate, we already knew that 60% of the electorate would vote for a third party if there was one, because they're sick of Labor and Liberal.
mm,
But a couple of them, or two or three of them, said they would work together, but the rest of them, I think the egos got the better of them. They don't want to share. And that is Australia's problem. I did a module 43, and when we had over 200 people, they were asking if I would start up a political party. But I'm getting on and I haven't had a holiday in many years. I'd like to get some life before I pass on, but I don't like where this country's going.
mm,
I know that if you follow a formula, you can take this country back again. Because
mm.
I was given that formula by an old man from Melbourne in 2004. I don't know if he's alive anymore, but he said, if you don't take us with you, you'll never make it. Because these boys protected a leader in another country with their lives until he was strong enough and had enough military support around him to protect himself against the elites. Because you can't get to be a president or a Führer or a prime minister unless you're controlled and from the elite families. And when you
Mm.
come from a humble background and want to take your country back, mate, you'll be assassinated real fast. And there were many attempts on him, but when you had 140 initial bodyguards, volunteers, and protecting his body with their bodies, no assassin could get close. There were many 40 attempts, but no one got close to him. And then when the army finally realized he was the real McCoy, they swung behind him. And so did
Wow.
the people. Can you imagine why he got 92 or more percent in 3 elections? Have you ever heard of a leader anywhere in the Western world get in the 90s? Well, why would people vote for someone if they weren't happy with him? Just think this one through. Has this country or any country you know about, when the population's declining irreversibly, so they say, we don't at least have 2 kids, each family, we go backwards irreversibly. Well, that was happening over there. So what he said is, for all those that have a baby, we'll wipe 25% of your mortgage. Now, if you get 2 babies, we'll wipe 50%. If you get 3, we'll wipe 75. If you have 4, no more mortgage. If you look at that country from 33 to 45, they had a boom in the population. Now, have you ever heard of a country ever do that before? Why do you suppose people liked him? It was the most prosperous country on earth. Those people were traveling on ocean liners, which was only reserved for the super rich, like American rich. And they're rubbing shoulders with the rich. Working class Germans rubbing shoulders with the rich of the rest of the world on ocean liners. First country in the world to have 2 weeks paid annual holidays. First country to ever have maternity leave, paid maternity leave. People think it all comes out of the UK. The UK screw their people. They have a class system, lords and serfs.
Mm.
They've always screwed their people, but not that country. And a lot of other countries followed suit afterwards because they prospered.
Is this
And
Germany? You're referring to Germany.
folks are German.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never been into politics and I never bothered with it because of the fact that I truly do believe that it's very controlled and who they want in power will get into power. So I just feel like that's wasted energy. But if you have a formula, like maybe we can work on it.
It takes a lot of work. And
Mm.
my hands are full at the moment, but maybe down the I don't know. I don't know what the world brings.
Maybe this might get some people interested to help out.
Possibly.
Mm.
I'll tell you another little experience I had. I had a fierce crusader living out at Ipswich.
Hmm.
He called me one day because he said he'd set up an umbrella organization. They wanted to take this country back, and it had a political wing. And because he somehow got wind that, I'd met some people who knew how to go about putting machinery in place to take a country, he said, "Can you come over and address my group over here?" So he told me in 3 hours. So I prepared all the documents, paperwork. It's all online now anyway, module 43. But anyway, I went out there and they were fascinated. Some of them had come from like 1,500 Ks away. And they asked if I could come back and move this along. And in a month's time. So I came back, but the problem was the organizer, he was there. There were 20 people there that first meeting. The second meeting, there were also 20 people, but 19 were new. So I didn't bring out my second stage. I went through the first stage again.
Mm.
Where I lived, it was like 2 hours. So it's a 4 hour round trip at my expense. And then they asked, "Look, could you come back? This is fascinating. We want to get to the next stage and we want to start putting infrastructure in." I said, "Yeah, well, I guess I could come one more time." So I did. And I brought my second stage notes. And the same guy was there, but there was another 19 new people again. And I gave up after that. And I thought, and I'm not having a go at any peoples, right? What I know is the Germans are the best organizers on earth, bar none. And even the Jays will say that they were the greatest fighters since Alexander the Great. They were outnumbered on average 7-1 and still lasted 6 years in a war. Nearly won the war on 2 occasions. Outnumbered 7-1. They know their stuff. They're good organizers. When I went to those meetings, they're all local people. And I thought, after 3 meetings, there's only one that's got the backbone and the wherewithal to follow through, and the other nearly 60, it's too hard, or uh, little things in life get in the road, or how committed are people? You want to take this country? Takes an awful big commitment. You can't go halfway because they'll either shoot you or lock you up. It's either the whole way or not at all. And what I find here is there might be a lot of people that would be prepared to go the whole way, but in percentage terms, I doubt it would even come up to 1%. But 1% of 25 million is still a lot of people, but it's not enough. You know what? The country needs leadership. And
Mm.
maybe if it saw some leadership, it would rally the people.
I think the problem as well is that we're too comfortable. I think people were willing to do that when we got our rights taken away, but we're back to normality and we're comfortable. So why would we need to do that? And I think it's going to take another big catalytic event where we're put in another position where we're limited, we're being controlled, we're being oppressed for people to get into that zone again because then they have nothing to lose. But that's the trick of being in Australia, the lucky country. We've got too much to lose, you know?
We do, but if you don't own anything, just control it. then you can go hard because they can't get anything.
Mm.
In fact, it may even look like, oh, this one's got nothing. Oh, just kick them out or something, get rid of them. If you had a lot to lose, then of course, they'll
Mm.
come after it. That's
Yeah.
why it's so important to make it look like you own nothing, just control everything, because that releases you to be more, well, no, I wouldn't say aggressive, but you can be more proactive.
Yeah.
And
Less fearful as
yeah,
well and vulnerable.
absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Mark, at the moment, I'm finding one of the biggest challenges people are having, especially those who have companies, is around the digital ID stuff.
Mm.
Have you found a way to get around this or how people
Yep,
can navigate?
yep.
Yeah.
In fact, we've got 5 non-consent processes on our website. Don't have to be a member to access them, but the digital non-consent to digital ID is one of them. In fact, I think it was the last one I did. It was about a year ago. So for a non-member, there's a donation from $5, and you can download a whole bunch of documents. It's 4 steps, three successive notices, and the fourth one is an affidavit. But there's a lot of documents there. If a lawyer were to do it, you're probably looking at $5,000 to $10,000 worth of documentation.
Wow.
So if you think $5, it's not a lot of money. Most people can afford it. But I put it together. It took me months to put it together. So I don't get paid for it. I just do it. But I guess if things got tough in this country again, then people would start using those documents, and maybe I'll recover a little bit of what I've tipped into it. But having said that too, we spend now about somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 a month just on add-ons for the website.
Mm.
I pay for that.
It's not cheap running a website.
Well, the guy who built it, he told me it was the biggest website he'd ever created. And we have someone else now for the last 18 months looking after it. And he said it's the biggest website he's ever dealt with. So there's a lot of material on it. But back to those non-consents, there's a digital ID one. So you're basically noticing all the hierarchy that you don't consent, but you'll comply when they provide evidence that they've got authority and jurisdiction to compel you to do it, and that they need to provide this, and this. And of course, they don't have all that, so they can't provide any evidence. So basically, they'll default, they won't reply, which is great because under equity, that's taken as a commercial default. So the second notice goes out, it's a default notice where you direct them to produce their evidence for the second time. They won't do it because they haven't got it. So it's a second default. Then you send out a final notice. They'll default that as well. 3 defaults and out. Sets up what's called a private default judgment where they, the respondent parties, all agree. This is all in the notice. It's all expressed in the final. They've agreed to the following. Boom, 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 boom. Therefore, if you're a director of a company, you're not compelled to provide director's ID.
Mm.
So it's only more recent that some legislation has come out for the director's ID. But the thing is, who does the legislation apply to? Only legal entities. They
Mm.
don't apply to men and women. So you won't have to do it. We've
Mm.
done others too, like vaccination, when people were concerned about taking the COVID, non-consent to that, non-consent to the lockdowns, non-consent to mRNA jabbing of livestock. They're doing that all over the country now. So we don't consent to it, and we're holding them liable for all the damages and injuries that are caused. Because mRNA, as a scientist, you know about that going through university. mRNA replicates the genetic information on DNA and
Mm.
forwards it on. But the problem is they're splicing it, and the mRNA could be anything. So it goes into the animal, alters their genetic makeup. Well, who eats the animal? We do. So it alters our. And the thing is, public research hasn't been done on the effects of it all. Privately, they would have done it. They know exactly what they're doing. They're
Mm.
not making it public knowledge. So if I go out to restaurants, I don't eat meat. I'm almost vegetarian anyway, but if I was going to eat something, I'd rather either grow my own or go to certified farmers where they say they don't jab their poultry, sheep, goats, cattle, or any other animal. If they don't jab them, then that's okay. I can't eat heavy meat anyway. My body won't allow me, but I'd like to have some chicken every now and again. We get, unjabbed chicken
Nice.
or fish. But I'd like to do one more non-consent. I've been trying for 18 months. I just haven't found the time yet, but we'll get there. It's a
Mm.
biggie, but we'll
It
put it up
is.
there as well.
It is.
Members of our website, by the way, all of those non-consents, they're free. It's
Yeah.
part of the membership. Our membership is $129. The first year, if people renew, it's $99. There's millions of dollars worth of intellectual property there.
And with the notices, when you've served all of them and they still are harassing you and causing harm, do you then take it further to court? How
Yeah,
would
you
you
can.
enforce
To
that?
a tribunal, you can take it to like NCAT or QCAT, VCAT, WCAT, whatever, or you can take it to a higher court if you want to, or you could just simply target their indemnity insurer, let them know
Hmm.
first. So that usually they'll back off then. Or you can take it to the Office of Fair Trading, Consumer Affairs. I use that a lot because they can actually pursue on your behalf and they can charge parties that are inappropriately aggressive towards you.
Hmm.
I've used them a few times and they've performed.
That's
The
good to
aggressor
know.
backs off. Yeah. So
No.
we've a whole bunch of strategies
Awesome. Yeah.
that people can use to stop an aggressor from approaching you.
Yeah, it's a form of threat and aggression. Yeah.
Well, it's already about half a dozen offences against federal legislation.
Mm.
Often threats with menace, assault. Assault can simply be when you're threatened.
Mm.
That's assault. Serious
Mm.
assault is if they've got weapons, maybe, or whatever. Breach of your peace, breach of that peace. But there are other offences just by them being aggressive. They're all federal offences. And by the way, there's a module there for CPOs as well, Commonwealth Public Official, which
Mm.
is in our forefathers put in our legislation, unique to Australia because they know about overarching governments, overreaching governments around the world. So they put it in there that anyone who sees someone acting aggressively or as a breach of the peace or any other offence against Commonwealth legislation, like I've already mentioned some, then it invokes the Office of Commonwealth Public Official, and you can notice them that if they don't cease and desist immediately, you'll file a formal complaint in that office to their superiors, and it's likely they'll lose their job. I've had police back down when I've even had courts when they wouldn't allow me to speak. I said, look, I was here last time and I saw a number of offences committed in this courtroom, and I'm going to lay formal complaints to the appropriate parties, unless, of course, I get to speak. And I'll do my best to not only mitigate the damages caused by those offences, but I'll attempt to prevent escalation of any further offences and make sure all parties in this courtroom are protected. I've had judges say, that man is speaking, because usually the lawyers for the other side don't want you speaking. They
Yes.
want to control the court case, but he's speaking because you don't have to point the finger. I look at the lawyers when I say, I'm here to protect all parties in this courtroom. The judge is included, and they know they're included. They know how to read between the lines. I learned how to do that too. When you've been 550 times before courts, you have to have learned something. So when a judge says something, they don't say the other half of what they try to mislead you. Well, I've learned how to do that too. Like, it's in my notes. It's in my notes. No, get your notes, and everyone's watching on.
So interesting.
Yeah, so I just say, my notes, I can help you. Get your notes, I can help you to hang yourself, but I forgot to mention to hang yourself, I just said to help you, right? Hang yourself. That the judges do that to us. It's not what they say. Often it's what they don't say,
Mm,
elements of what they say, but we're not listening. I've learned to listen well. And when you
mm.
listen, you learn.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that, Mark. Really, really interesting.
We're all very powerful beings.
Mm,
It's just that we're not taught anything at school or university anymore. They've dumbed us down big time, big
mm.
time.
And we're so caught up in the rat race that if we want to learn, it's hard.
Well, thanks for saying the rat race. That
Mhm.
triggers something else. You need to get the cash flow 101 game.
I've played that. It's good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm yet to apply it in my life, but I have played it.
Yeah. I went to see Kiyosaki in 99. And so I came home, I said to my then partner, my 18-year standing wife, I said, I'm buying this game. Oh, how much is it? Oh, it's $300. You're not buying that. I said, you don't have to play. So I went and got it, brought it home, right? She's going, you bought it. I said, you don't have to play it. But my 9-year-old, she's now in banking, middle management, being groomed. Well, she told me that because she's being taught now by all the managers, they're grooming her for senior management. She's 33, but anyway,
Wow.
she was playing, she got out of the rat race. We both took about 3 hours to get out of the rat race, the first game, because we were still reading the rules. But from the second game on, we're always out in about an hour. And most of the time, she actually got out before me. She
Yeah.
really learned how to leverage.
Yeah, that is something we need to teach kids when they're
Absolutely.
old enough to learn or
Throw
understand.
Monopoly out, get cash flow 101. You
Yeah.
get the fast track and you'll create wealth real quick. And if you put those principles into real life, it'll happen. But you've got to learn about how to structure your tax return so you don't bleed, because that is vital. The
Yeah.
game doesn't teach that. They wouldn't allow it on the market.
That's where you come into it, Mark.
Yeah. Well, it makes a difference.
Yeah, because there are people who figure it out, but then when it comes to selling and the money they make off that, they take a large portion of that off people. So it's so hard to even when you're being smart and you're selling and you're making money, they've still got their freaking hands in there.
Always. Well, in the public realm, they're not productive. They
Mm,
don't they don't go through the real life of the school of hard knocks. They have a silver spoon and they want it, all the things from you, from the productive. So we've got to learn how to protect what we've got and not give our productivity away.
mm,
And those who are awake and prepared to learn it will reap the benefits of it. It's that simple. And it's not hard. I mean, people go through school and spend 12 years at school. You spend 1 year with us and you'll be in a different life in 12 months' time. My
mm.
webmaster was the same. He was a member for a year. And then when we put an email out needing a new webmaster, he put his hand up and he didn't want to charge me. And I said, everyone's worth their salt. I said, just charge the regular price. He said, no, I don't want to charge you because you changed my life. He said he didn't think he had any control over his destiny because he's got regulation costs, compliance costs, audits, paying tax. He said he's just peddling for years. And then he started putting into practice everything on the website. And 12 months later, no tax, bypassing a lot of the regulations. He said, I'm going forwards now. And by the way, he's bought a 5-acre property now.
Wow, that's
He's
awesome.
really zooming forward. But he was so grateful because he learnt that from the website. And I get that a lot. People who put those things into practice.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't mention it's solutionsempowerment.org, by the
I
way.
was gonna ask you, for those who don't know, so solutionsempowerment.org. I'll put that on the description anyway. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And is it just one membership every year? Is that how it works?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's easy.
It's a 12-month membership.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and you can listen to as many of the webinars as you want. Whatever issue comes up, hopefully you'll see the issues covered by a webinar. So whether
Yeah.
you're dealing with a council or dealing with court or dealing with a debt or something,
Yeah, so
then
you've got things on that and tax, the mandates and
how to deal with the lockdown and how to deal with
yeah.
jab or how to deal with the police approaching you, how to. There's just so much stuff there.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot in there. Yeah.
Yeah. But you can watch them any. Sometimes it takes. People have told me, 3 or 4 times to watch a particular webinar before they really start absorbing it all,
Yeah.
because it's just so much information. But because there's about 85, there are some common denominators between them. And these are all really the rules and principles of equity when you know how to deal with people.
Mm.
Subject matters might be different, but there are core things that once you've internalized, you apply it to everything.
Mm. What's some advice you can give people who want to join and members and how to utilize the information and I suppose not be disheartened when there's a little bit of an obstacle, Because I find that's very common with people. Like they'll sign up to something and then they'll come across an obstacle and they think, oh, this is rubbish, and they just kind of give up.
Well, that does happen. And
Yeah.
it's a test too. But I would say, firstly, there's no need to fear anything anymore because everything we teach is all lawful. There's nothing we teach that's illegal or unlawful, two
Mm.
different things. But if you can ditch the fear and just learn, you'll realize that the more you pick up, the quicker your fear dissipates. So just look at as many webinars that are appropriate to your situation. Out of the 85, you might have 5 or 6 key ones that are really issues with you. So
Yeah.
there's some common denominators. So I'll go through that in a sec. I suggest look at the foundational knowledge course first. Doesn't take long to do, it's just maybe a few hours, 2 or 3 hours, but it gives you the two different realms in life, the public and the private realm, and why things work, why things are the way they are, and why you have protection in the private realm and how you can create what it is you want in the private realm, whereas in the public realm, you're just going around that rat race, being
Mm.
fleeced right, left, and center. It gives you the mindset. From there, I would say there are some key webinars you should watch. If you've got an outstanding matter, let's say, you've got a credit card debt. Obviously, there's a credit card webinar to watch. So watch that webinar. There's another one that is 10 ways to discharge your debts. So your favorite way might be different to my favorite way. So you watch 10 ways of doing and you pick the one that you think, oh, I like this one best. So pick the thing that resonates with you. Then there are some more. There's one called holding your position. For instance, when you do the paperwork to discharge that credit card debt, and about 1 in 5, it just goes away. It's gone, finished. They don't communicate, but it's taken care of. The other 4 times or 80% or thereabouts, depending on who the creditor is, they'll write back or they'll phone, we don't know what to do with that. Or they might write back and say, we don't accept that form of payment. Holding position is knowing how to deal with it. And it's
Mm.
not taught anywhere, but that's one of our biggies, is knowing how to get closure, how to get settlement. So when they say we don't accept that form of payment, well, thank you for admitting it was a form of payment. And by the way, under bankers' acceptance, isn't a payment refused discharge the liability to pay a debt? If I owed you $100 and I gave you the $100 and you said, Mark, I don't want it, do I now owe it to you because you refused it? No, banker's acceptance says a payment refused discharges the liability to pay. Beauty, we just won. So
Very
it's like,
cheeky.
it's the best game in town when you know how to deal with matters. But that's a biggie, is the holding position one.
Yeah.
There's another one that's called round table meetings to settle any outstanding matter. I spent most of my career helping people with settling things, whether it's in paperwork or in courts. Been in a lot of proceedings and got a lot of results too.
Mm.
But these days, you don't need to go to court, even if there's an impending proceeding. I rather just ring up whoever it is and say, look, we'd like to exhaust every opportunity to settle. If there's a legitimate outstanding debt or something, no problem. I'll bring my checkbook and we'll take care of it. But we have some concerns we want addressed first. And, we slip in. So when we get into the meeting, they'll say, well, you got your checkbook? Yeah, we did. Oh, you're going to pay. Can you pay first? No, hang on. We did say that we take care of it. I didn't say I was going to pay. I just said I'd take care of it one way or another. But we have
Mm.
some concerns first. And these are my concerns. But I tell you, I've done that many round table meetings where we just wipe out whoever they are. It doesn't matter who they are, whether
Wow.
it's the Registrar of New South Wales in the Department of Primary Industry, we wipe them out with their senior maritime police officer who was trespassing the fishermen's boats all the time and never did afterwards again. That was in 2019. They've never trespassed the boats since, because
Wow.
to them, now that you've acknowledged these people have rights and they're not subject to your legislation and you have no authority, you've admitted to, then if you do something to them, they validly have a legitimate cause to sue you. And I'd suggest tread lightly. You don't need all that. Oh, we got to do what we got to do. I said, you do. But if you harm them, they have an entitlement to pursue an award. So
Mm.
just tread lightly. Or heads of the banks. I've met a few of the heads of banks at meetings with mortgages and we wipe them out. Or we met the senior tax lawyer in Melbourne because they had a court hearing next week and Supreme Court. And I told him, make an appointment, we'll go in and we'll see if we can sort it out, $250,000 tax debt. It was only a little one, but he was stressed, so I helped him. And so we delivered a promissory note, and 3/4 of an hour later, we had a meeting out of our hands, and they postponed the court hearing. And then they wrote to us and said, we're going to adjourn another month. It's going with a QC now, and they'll answer your questions, which they never did. And then 3 months later, they wrote back and said it's been withdrawn. I got lots of them.
That's
So we
amazing.
cleaned them up at a meeting, round table meeting. You learn the procedures to wipe out your adversary there. And then there's another webinar I suggest to people to watch. It's called Setup Questions, where you ask certain questions, which if they answer correctly, they incriminate themselves. If they answer to the negative, they would be lying, and they won't lie because they'll know that they're lying. So they'll just remain silent. Well, you ask the same question 3 times, they default 3 times, and therefore it sets under equity. You have the status and the authority to answer for them. So what I say, if they don't, Your Honour, I asked them 3 times to provide evidence that the form of payment used was insufficient to discharge the liability, and they failed to do so. They've agreed with me that it was sufficient. When can I have the court order? They go into panic mode. I said, well, they've agreed. The records show they agreed with me. So when can we have the? Oh, no, we're going to adjourn. No, we're not. We are not going to adjourn. What order are you compelled to make when the parties are in agreement? Oh, I'm going to reserve. No, you are not going to reserve your decision.
Wow.
I just make something up with whoever I'm helping. Your Honour, if you're not prepared to make the appropriate order, then my friend instructs that he'll accept an order for an adjournment sine die. That means permanently. And then he
Ah,
calls the lawyer to go, adjourn sine die. Got lots of them too. They won't give you the judgment because if everyone can use a promissory note or a bill of exchange to get rid of their mortgage, the whole country is going to get out of debt and people will become free. They're not going to let it happen. They're not
no.
going to allow you to
No
make
precedent. No precedent there.
it, but they will kick it out of court if you hold your position in court. And then
Yeah.
you're free. No more mortgage. Beautiful.
That's awesome. That's cool.
We have the power and
Yeah.
the status and the standing and authority. They think they do until you pull the rug out from under them. I tell you, I've had people come from Sunshine Coast to Sydney to go to Supreme Court hearings because I didn't have any in Queensland at the time. We had 14 people turn up, four of them from Sunshine Coast.
Mm.
And after a 4 hour battle where we turned the tide, they said, oh, we thought they were going to run over you. I won't describe what happened, but anyway, I turned it gently, took a while. And afterward, we're outside meeting, and it's like a rugby scrum. And they're all going here, oh man, you turned them around. This was better than the AFL grand final. Man, we know what to do now and how to beat them. And this was the greatest thing we ever saw. And, you know,
That's cool. I would love to witness you in action in court. If you ever do, let me know. Ever
uh,
go.
I'm trying not to go to courts anymore.
I don't
Round,
blame you.
round twos are
They're
great.
draining places.
Oh, there's this other fellow who's become quite competent.
Hmm.
Um, I got him to come along to a round table years ago, and this was to bankrupt somebody, and we stopped all that. Anyway, when I got outside, he said, "My God, you just wouldn't allow him through. You just brought up the facts, the legislation, and just said, well, you can't do that. That you would be committing an offence." And he said, now he could see how to maneuver. It's not that difficult, but where is it taught? Well,
Yeah.
we teach it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm very grateful that you've created something for people to go to with pretty much all the processes that you've learnt.
People can be in a totally different space in 1 or 2 years, honestly.
Yeah. I can imagine you would change a lot of lives with that information.
I have,
Yeah.
and I do get a reward from when they tell me. It's satisfaction.
Yeah. It's been a really cool chat, and I feel like you've shared a lot of top secret things with me today.
A few little things. Still plenty in the arsenal.
Yeah, I definitely would love to have you back on, Mark. And if you ever feel like there's more you want to talk about, other important topics down the track, I feel like we've got some tough times coming as well. So I'm sure your knowledge will prove useful for that.
Yeah, in Finland, they just started a bird flu lockdown in certain regions. Honestly, bird flu, give me a break. I learned at university already. I did agricultural science.
Mm,
And we learned even then that viruses had never been isolated. They're just a theory. Do you know
mm,
what? Today, there's been no virus on Earth ever been isolated. And I have about four Freedom of Information's Australian ones, and I saw about 20 different UK ones
mm,
where people ask the authorities, government, and health departments for evidence of the isolation of CV2 is the virus.
mm,
And they all say, well, we decline your application on the basis after an extensive search, we haven't been able to identify a document or anything relating to an isolation of that particular virus. People got to learn there is no such thing as a virus. There's
mm.
bacteria. There's microbes.
Honestly, till this day, when I hear someone say I've got COVID, I'll just look at them like, you don't. You're just going through a detox.
Absolutely. You had a heavy detox.
It's it because of whatever else is going on in the environment. You're just going through a detox. Okay, don't even say that word. I'm sick of hearing it.
Well, we're detoxing all the time. They're poisoning the entire bionosphere,
That's
the
right.
hemisphere, the soils, the air, the
Mm,
water. I have my own water and my own power, but we filter the water as well. They're poisoning the food. They're poisoning everything. They're
mm,
anti-mankind, these people who are controlled by
mm,
the beings that control them. That's
That's
another,
a whole nother topic, isn't it, Mark?
yeah, that's another biggie, but
Yeah.
you know.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Oh, it's a
Um,
pleasure, Dee,
I really hope people use your platform. I'm sure they'll get so much out of it, and you've put a lot of your heart and soul into that, and we're very lucky to have that. So
well,
thank
I just hope a percentage of the world gets onto it so that, you know, you reach the 100 monkey syndrome so we can all become free. I can't do it alone. We need some help. So that was the mission to get it up there to draw people so that we get a lot of competent people.
And then
Yeah,
a lot more of us can be in the privates, and there can be more things to cater for the private realm. When
that's
it's so
right. We can run a
limited.
parallel system. That's
Yeah.
another thing I wanted to work on.
Yeah.
Completely parallel system. So we draw all those from the public into the private and they go bust.
Yeah. That's awesome. I could just sit here and listen to you speak all day, to be honest. It's so interesting.
Good. Well, there's no shortage of subject matters. We have a new subject matter the first Wednesday of every month that gets recorded. So
Okay.
our webinar list is growing slowly, but also we have 2 webinars a month just on Q&A. So when people want questions answered, that's a great opportunity. That's free to our members. So
Awesome.
it's the second and the third Wednesday of every month, 7 o'clock. A member goes onto our database, so a reminder would go out the day before that, you know, the Q&A is coming up. So if people have a particular question or a couple of questions, they can just put it
Yeah.
into the window and I go through and answer all the questions, or as many as I can in an
That's
hour
good
and a
to
half.
know. Yeah.
Mhm.
Can people hire you for help in their personal cases that they might find is quite, I guess, complex or difficult or
Occasionally, maybe.
mm,
I did make 2 slots available for a period of time, 4 and 5 o'clock on a Thursday, but I cut it out when people from all over the country and around the world said, look, we can't wait 6 weeks. We want one now. And then they want a 7 o'clock and an 8 o'clock and then a 2 in the morning. And I've done that many hours in my life. I want to wind back, not add more. So I'm not looking forward to more appointments, but if there was an urgent something or other, then yeah, they can just get in touch with our admin and we can
yeah,
maybe schedule something. But
yeah.
I'm not looking for more work. I have really a lot to do.
I can imagine, Mark,
We do
and
have a resident ex-barrister, and people can book him for consultations, but
mm,
he's not so much in the private realm. He knows his skills came from dealing with the public realm.
yeah.
We did have another lady, but she's gone off to have a second baby. So well,
Mm. Can we just clone you, Mark? Like, can we clone you?
had that one a few times too. I think there are clones though, because there are a lot of people around that are getting good results, and we have a success section on the website, and that list is growing. People are sharing
That's great.
settlements. So
Awesome.
there are people who are getting good successes with different subject matters.
Yeah. That's such a good little section there where people can share their experience and then others know that works.
I don't have to rely on me anymore. There are
Yeah.
lots of others that are getting good successes.
Oh, Mark, you really do deserve a holiday. I hope you just get some time off just to chill,
Yeah, we'll
you
make time.
know. Yeah, because you've done a lot. You've done a lot. And you're a good man. You're very humble. It's really nice to connect with you.
Well, that opens up doors. I learned that long ago. Aggressive
Yeah.
people have doors shut on them. When
Yeah.
you're respectful and you like people, doors open. Well, thank you very much too. And you're a very nice lady too. And I think you'll do very well too. You'll attract all the right sort of people.
I hope so. Thank you, Mark.